Just making sure. Looks like everybody is set. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you to everyone who was able to make the time to attend this presentation. My name is Vincent Tarr. I know it can probably go without saying, but we're presenting this information for educational purposes, and we cannot give legal advice. We will be following up the slideshow with a presentation of our real estate product, EasyCDF, which stands for Closing Disclosure Forms. And we'll be able to provide answers to any technical questions regarding that software during a Q&A session following the presentation. The major changes from the CFPB are now the norm for real estate closings, moving us away from the 3-page RESPA-compliant HUD format to a 5-page closing disclosure and a 3-page loan estimate. In addition to the loan estimates that the lender provides, and the closing disclosure that can be provided by either the attorney or the lender, attorneys are being called on more and more to provide an ALTA statement as well as a seller's disclosure. The changes that have been mandated are the early truth in lending and good faith estimate being consolidated into a single loan estimate form, the final truth in lending statement in the current HUD 1 being pulled together into a single closing disclosure form, attorneys getting called on to generate a seller's disclosure, normally based on the existing closing disclosure, and sometimes the title company or bank will also ask for an ALTA statement. An ALTA settlement statement is a line-by-line breakdown of the closing. Just a moment. Somebody was asking if there's credit for this. I just wanted to let you guys know that this is provided as an educational webinar by EasySoft, but is not part of any course system, or at least not that I'm aware of. Now, I've only gone through a couple of slides, but already you've probably seen a few abbreviations. With everything going on in the closings world right now, there's a wealth of new acronyms for us to learn. I've already shown a few of these terms, and most of you will be familiar with them, but let's take a moment to go through them all and break down what they mean to make sure everyone's on the same page before we move further. You're already familiar with the RESPA, or Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act of 1974, and we've even touched on the Truth in Lending Act's forms earlier. The CFPB, or Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, was created as a result of the Dodd-Frank Act to handle integrating the TILA and RESPA forms under a new overarching rule. TILA is Truth in Lending Act. On October 3rd, 2015, the Know Before You Owe mortgage rule was implemented, replacing the existing forms with 2 new forms. The loan estimate provided 3 days after the application for a loan is submitted, and the closing disclosure provided 3 days prior to the closing itself. This new rule, the TILA-RESPA or TILA-RESPA Integrated Disclosure Rule, also called TRID. MISMO is the Mortgage Industry Standards Maintenance Organization. They have a set of standards that create certain files, and their standards are growing in popularity because they're intended to ensure consistency throughout a closing at every level. Right now, though, there's still a lot of growing pains with this change. And finally, ALTA, the American Land Title Association. They're the latecomer to the field. Since October, several groups have started asking for attorneys to prepare these forms in addition to the TRID-compliant disclosure. Keep in mind that the ALTA forms are not government official forms, but they are popular to the government. Like, the government likes them. So let's take a look at these new forms. The loan estimate will be created by the mortgage broker or lender, who is responsible for the accuracy of that document. MISMO compliance will be important in making sure that this estimate is properly accounted for on the closing disclosure. The first of those disclosures, the buyer's disclosure, will be the responsibility of either the settlement agent or the lender, and it's the lender's job to maintain accuracy. Normally, the buyer's disclosure consists of both buyer and seller information, but our software does offer an option to only do buyer information. The seller's disclosure will be the settlement agent's job to produce. This only contains the seller's information and doesn't address the loan in any way. Once again, responsibility falls to the lender to ensure there are no discrepancies. And finally, the ALTA statement is a popular addition, especially for title companies who want to have their fees itemized on these forms with more detail and separate from the closing disclosure. So that covers the basics. Let's get into some details, starting from the beginning of the closing, the loan estimate. EasySoft has recently released a loan estimate module as part of the EasyCDF software. So if you are an active or trial user right now, you already have this in the program to take a look at. The loan estimate replaced the old truth in lending disclosure and good faith estimate with a single 3-page document that contains a wealth of loan-related information, not just the loan terms and amount, but also projected payments, estimated interest rates, insurance and taxes, provisions for state laws, breakdowns of loan costs, and an estimated cash to close, which will carry forward to the CD. Again, CD stands for closing disclosure. That was the loan estimate, but most attorneys, for most attorneys, that's already extant when your turn comes up. You'll be doing the disclosures and ALTA statements. ALTA, like I said, is new, so let's talk about that one. The ALTA statement is not a substitute for the HUD or CD. It's an additional standardized form from American Land Title Association, ALTA, and is generally for the title insurance industry. These standardized forms itemize fees and charges over a simple layout of 3 columns or 5 columns, depending on how you look at it, that allows you to quickly read off the sale price, loan amount, loan and title charges, adjustments and payoffs, recording and transfer charges, prorations, commissions, and more. Remember that any ALTA statements you generate should match totals with the closing disclosure and with any other ALTA statements. And finally, the HUD program. Now, the CD is the standard, but don't let go of your HUD program either, because you'll sometimes still need it. It's important to know when you'll be processing with the HUD one that we're still familiar with, and when you're going to be working with the new CD forms, because the old hasn't entirely been discontinued because of the new. The loan estimate and disclosures are the new primaries, often augmented with ALTA statements at the request of the banks, but in cases with home equity revolving lines of credit, reversed mortgages, mobile homes or other dwellings not attached to land, and no interest second mortgages, you'll be using the HUD instead. Replacing the HUD, EasyCDF is a new primary real estate program from EasySoft, and it's been designed with 100% TRID compliance as its top priority. That includes built-in safeguards to ensure data accuracy. The real estate closing process, automated with EasyCDF, improves your productivity, reducing your closing time by as much as 80%, and the new real estate suite that we've created comes with Easy HUD as well, so that you can handle those special situations when you still need that form. It also has an easy amortization process, or a tool for that process. Before I jump into a demonstration of the software, let me lay out the steps that we're going to follow. For most EasySoft users, the closing disclosure itself will be their first stop, so we default the program to open to that page, as you'll see in a moment. But some of our users will want to start with a loan estimate, which is the first of the 3 key forms with the new closing rules. The loan estimate module allows easy generation of the loan estimate from manually entered data or from an import with our internal MISMO tool, or with BSPAT, who we've recently integrated with. Next up is the closing disclosure, which is broken down into 5 tabs to match the CD's 5 pages, and it's an almost perfect match. Most firms start their closing at this stage, generating a RESPA-compliant HUD or TILA-compliant CDF, with the options to print the full closing disclosure, just a seller's disclosure, or both if they want. Then, now that these have become more popular, you'll probably want to generate one of the 4 ALTA forms. You can do this quickly with our automated products in the Advanced Printing module, or generate one from scratch using blanks that are stored in the Real Estate Docs section of the software. Next, you'll move on to case data. Case data stores a comprehensive catalog of information on the case that you can use to look up information later on buyers, sellers, lenders, etc., or just automatically enter it into a host of real estate documents that can be generated and filled out quickly and efficiently, including your own library of forms. Keep in mind that case data and real estate docs generally come after the closing disclosure. So while it might be your nature or what you're used to jump straight to the case data section of the software, because in a lot of softwares that's what you'll do, in EasyCDF, it's designed to make it as quick as just plugging straight into the form. So start with a CD, then move on to case data once it's done, and case data will mostly be filled out for you. Your closing is being finalized and the documents have been sent out. The next step is to balance the ledger and send out checks. The EasySoft software, both HUD and CDF, contain ledger functions. They're identical between the two programs, and the ledger function will help make sure that everything comes out correctly. You'll be able to print checks as well. And finally, move on to the 1099 filing page that lets you electronically file as you go throughout the year instead of having to wait until the end. So simply put, what do you need to complete TRID compliant closings? First of all, you need to be sure that your software can handle the new loan estimates and the closing disclosure, but also supports both ALTA and HUD-1 statements. Don't forget that MISMO compliance may not be guaranteed. Be sure to confirm you will have this key compliance as more and more companies begin to use this tool. One last thing before I move on to showing you the EasyCDF program itself. What you're seeing on the screen right now are a few free resources that can be a big help in making the adjustment to the recent changes a little bit less painful. First of all, there are some really great websites that you can look to for answers to unusual questions or legal questions that you might have. We've also posted these links on our website, EasySoft-USA.com. That's www.easysoft-usa.com. The two that I think are the most useful up here are going to be www.alta.org, where you can find the ALTA forms for reference and some instructions on those, and www.consumerfinance.gov, which is the official CFPB website. That is where the closing disclosure rules came from, and that's where you can look up a lot of minutia about them. Before I move on to the presentation of the software itself, I wanted to thank you for attending this webinar. I hope that the information we've just gone over and that we will be going over in a moment are informative, and that the demonstration will fill in any of the blanks that you have. But again, we will have a presentation at the end, or a Q&A at the end. So if anything is missed on the presentation that you're curious about, use the questions box on the side, type it in, and I'll be happy to answer those as soon as the demonstration is over. Just to let you know, one of our product consultants will try and be in contact with any attendees that we can shortly. But if you want to place an order now or have any questions, just call 800-905-7638, and you can talk to our sales department for any information, or you can talk to our operations department about billing. And again, thank you for attending. Stand by. In just a moment, I'm going to switch over to our software. While I'm doing this, I did notice that somebody was asking if they would have access to a copy of the slides or a copy of the presentation. And I'm not sure if we can get a copy of the slides out, but we will be uploading this webinar as a recording onto the website for your reference. All right. So this is EasyCDF. Most of you have probably seen this by now. I've just opened up the program, so as I mentioned earlier, it's opening up to the closing disclosure itself. You'll notice at the top of the page that there's a gray box up there where you can reference quickly the information with the borrower's name, seller's name, date of the closing, file number, etc. That's just reference information. Nothing gets typed into that gray box. All the information gets entered down here. But for this presentation, because I want to cover everything that our software has to offer, on this newest version, which if you have EasyCDF, you'll start getting prompts for tomorrow to download this. I'm going to actually switch to the loan estimate. The loan estimate, again, is the 3-page document that starts the whole process. So this is my loan estimate screen, very similar to the closing disclosure screen because it's very similar form. But the loan estimate is just the loan stuff. So we have an applicant's name and the lender's name. No seller yet, things like that. Those will come later. If I put in information on this page, I'm going to put in some information right now. We're going to choose sale price so that we have some information, just some basics here. Put in a sale price and a loan amount. So we have some information entered. One thing that a lot of people get confused about, so I'm going to demonstrate that as well. To add context, you see this, there's a contact box, but there's nowhere to type because there's a little person here. Click on him, and we can add our contacts. Okay. So here I've added a contact really quickly, and he pops up here. There's all our information, again, going to the top of the page. Now, on the loan estimate, very similar to the closing disclosure, all the loan information is here. Loan amounts will be here, interest rates, projected payments, just like on the CD. You have projected payments in columns. There's always at least one column, but you can add more and delete them if you need to. The second page is all itemization. Since this is a loan document, the itemization is pretty standard. You can use these drop-downs that we provide to quickly pick out the appropriate fee for the appropriate line and type in the values. It totals as you go. And then if I scroll down to the bottom of the page here, you can see that I, just like on the CD, which we'll see in a moment, have a total at the very bottom. So my total closing costs are being calculated. And then there's a cash to close calculator here. I'm going to put some values in there just so that we can see where those go in just a moment. Okay. So we put some information in. Page 3 is a little bit more about contacts and some more loan information, mostly just filling it in. So we move on to the closing disclosure. And here's where my putting that information in and making you guys wait through that comes in handy. You can see now that the information I put in on the loan estimate has carried forward. Now, if you don't do the loan estimates yourself, you might not think that's very useful. But if you have a MISMO form, or if you use BeesPath, which is a tool that we integrate with, BeesPath is very similar to Closing Insights in its way it's used. You can quickly import a loan estimate from a bank, and it will populate the loan estimate tab. All that information will pop in, and then when you come over to the closing disclosure, it's all here as well. And then all you need to do is fill in the additional information that you wouldn't have otherwise had, like the seller. And again, it's all the same information. Page 2, same itemization, but a larger page. And you'll notice that some of the information didn't carry over because what's estimated on the loan may not actually be the final amount. So we refill this information in. I accidentally opened up a tax thing. Sorry about that. On section E of page 2 is our taxes and government fees. We use a jurisdiction tool. If you select your jurisdiction, it will help you calculate. Yes, it will help you calculate your transfer taxes, recording fees, things like that. So in this case, since I had a little bit of information in, it helped me calculate my transfer taxes. All right. And that's what that little pop-up was. I do apologize for just kind of springing that up out of nowhere. And then at the bottom of the page, it's all totaled up. Then we get to page 3. And this is where the amounts from the loan estimate and the amounts that are finalized would go. So the amounts from the loan estimate can be carried over directly or typed in if you need to. But these amounts here are mostly in red and blue boxes. You've probably seen a couple of red and blue boxes and wondered what those are if you've never used our software before. Our system uses red and blue boxes to indicate what's being filled in. Our system normally will pre-populate these fields for you based on information elsewhere in the form in the white boxes. So, for instance, if I have, let's add something to our total closing costs for the borrower. I'm just going to give him a legal fee here. So he's got a legal fee, adds up, gives him a pretty high value in J. We go over to page 3, and you can see that it populated that in. It's a red box, which means I can't edit it. It has to be the same value. So it locks it in. That way there are no mistakes. Some of these boxes are blue. That means that while it normally will pre-fill the information for me, I might need to go in and add something because there might be extenuating circumstances. So I can always type into this one. Okay. As we go down, you'll see the rest of page 3. At the top, it's a cash to close. The rest of page 3 is very similar to what you already might have seen before. If you've ever used the HUD, it's pretty much identical to the first page of the HUD. You've got seller on one side, borrower on the other. So this is the borrower side, the seller side. First, it's due from the borrower and to the seller at closing. And then lower down, it's going to be paid by or on behalf of the borrower and due from the seller. So they're just sort of corresponding sections. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the specifics in those, but if you have any questions, I can be more than happy to answer those. And then at the bottom, cash to close is calculated again. Sometimes the cash to close will calculate a little different down here. It just depends on the situation. All right. Page 4 and page 5 is mostly itemization, mostly check boxes and a few lines that you might need to type into. Occasionally there's escrow information you need to fill in, but mostly it's just boxes to be checked off. And on page 5, there's some loan calculations and more contacts to add, particularly the brokers, the real estate brokers and mortgage broker. And that's the CD. One last thing I want to point out, which is on this page, is a checkbox. I have it checked already. Print seller signature addendum. For some reason, when the CFPB generated their forms, they didn't include a seller's signature line. It's just not part of the closing disclosure or the seller's disclosure. So we've added a seller's signature addendum because we want the seller to sign. And we figured that you probably do as well. What this does is give you a separate page styled after the borrower signatures, which are included on the final page of the standard CDF. And it's a separate page. So it can be removed if needed, but if wanted, it's just a checkbox away. And then when you print, that's by going to print and choosing the option of your choice. We're going to go buy or sell this time. It will create that seller line as the final section. And I do apologize. It's a brand new installation, so some of the tasks it's doing them for the first time, and they can take a little bit of extra time because of it. All right? And so you can see here's my CD, all filled out, ready to go. Well, partially filled out and ready to go, and with the seller's addendum taking up the rear. Again, if you have any questions after this little presentation, just let me know. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. All right, so the closing disclosure is filled out, loan estimate's filled out. I've shown you how to print the closing disclosure. Under print, you can also print a seller's disclosure or a buyer's disclosure, and the loan estimate's also available here under print. There's just 4 different options. For ALTA, you go to Modules at the top of the page, choose Advanced Printing, and here are our ALTA options. I'm going to choose the Combined Statement. As you can see, ALTA forms are very straightforward. The description's in the middle, seller on one side, borrower on the other. They try and make it as clear as possible. We've done our best to mimic their style. So we've taken a look at the loan estimates, closing and seller's disclosures, and the ALTA statement. Those are the main documents. Now, let's take a look at case data and real estate docs. Like I said, a lot of people go to case data first, but you actually want to fill out the closing disclosure first, so that when you get to the buyer and seller, the information's already filled in. You can see I didn't add a seller yet. I can press this little guy button and add him now, but if I filled out the closing disclosure first, all the information would have already been there. I'm going to add a seller now. And he's going to be at 123 Rare Boulevard. I don't know why I put that on a second line. And that fills that in. These lines are locked in. You can't type into here. You do need to use the little person button to add them. If you need to edit them, there's a little edit button. And then case data has all sorts of different sections. You can fill in all kinds of information. Some of it will fill from the loan estimate or the closing disclosure. Some of it will come from MISMO. But some of it, for instance, contact name for title. You might need to add that yourself. Then, once the appropriate case data information is filled in, you can go to real estate docs. And we have a huge wealth of documents across a couple of different states and a common section, which is nationwide, and access all kinds of documents that can be very useful to quickly get things done on a closing. Right. So what you're looking at right now is one of my real estate documents. I have, like I said, tons and tons sorted into different folders here. What you can see on this one, because this is a really good example, is a pretty much pre-made document that fills in these gray sections, information from my case data. There's a few other sections which are highlighted in yellow that require you to enter specific information that wouldn't come from case data, that would be specific to that particular printing of the document. But it saves a lot of time as opposed to having to write the whole thing up. Once it's all filled in, you just go. You can save a copy if you want, or you can go to print. You can also save it as a PDF and email it out. Okay. So that's case data and real estate docs now. Next up is the ledger. If you've ever used our HUD software, the ledger looks very familiar to you. It hasn't changed in any way. It's just a quick breakdown, payments and deposits. The payments can be printed as checks. We use a third-party check generating tool. So when you go, when you select it off the one you want to print, you hit print check. I'll just do one. Print check. because I'm lazy and I want to fill in the names. All it does is ask you, how do you want it? 1 check and 2 stubs, or 3 checks per page. Pick out your printer tray and set a starting check number and hit print, and you're good to go. It takes care of the rest, sends it right off to your printer. Okay. And then you can also access here a ledger statement or export from here to QuickBooks. While we do offer an export to QuickBooks, I can't do much in the way of technical support for it because almost all of the technical aspect is on the QuickBooks side. But there's one other section to go through. That is the 1099. You can see I'm getting a couple of pop-ups because this is my first time with this computer going into this module. What it wanted was my filer information so that it knows who I am and can quickly generate a 1099 on the fly. Ideally, that means that when I finish with a normal closing one seller, I come in here, everything's filled in. All I have to do is hit right here, Submit 1099-S. I hit that button, fill in my 1099 tax ID number, the one I'm going to be using for filing, and my password, and off it goes. The way you get that password is you enroll with us using the electronic filing enrollment form. It's intended to be absolutely hassle-free. You just fill it in, hit submit, and it's done. It'll wait in case you need to make a correction before it's time to send it on to the sellers and send it on to the IRS. It waits in a queue. But on January after the tax year, it is sent out, and a copy is printed and sent to the seller as well, as long as they have a forwarding address that can be used. And that's about it. Like I said, there's a lot of features in here. BeesPath is brand new. MISMO has been improved a little bit. We have a lot of new features hanging out all over this program. But I want to actually take some of your questions. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the questions box. Give me a moment to bring that up so that I can answer some questions. Give me just a moment.